Thank you, everybody, and welcome to our Composting Awareness Week. It's Wednesday the 5th, and we are handling a deep dive on aerated static pile composting. We have a number of speakers with us today, 2 speakers that are each going to take 12 minutes, and then 2 respondents that will take between 8 minutes each to respond to any of the questions. Just to give you a little bit of background, our first speaker coming up is Wiebke Volkmann. Wiebke is from Namibia and having many years of experience of helping put holistic management principles into practice in rural communities and with commercial farming businesses and co-managing her own family cattle farm. COVID-19 brought Wiebke to get engaged in urban agriculture, first experimenting on her own suburban backyard, and then later on a permaculture training and demonstration center that's part of the farm Okokuna and urban agricultural project that is on the edge of the informal settlements of Windhoek. Here she successfully trialed and now implemented a modular production method using urban garden waste and cattle manure from slaughter facility. Individual entrepreneurs, mostly women from the nearby shack dweller settlements, now produce high quality compost for sale as well as for the use of their own allotment gardens. We look forward to hearing more from you, Wiebke. Over to you.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Hello, everybody. This is my first presentation using this medium, so I'm a little bit nervous, but here I am. Okay, so I'm not really talking, I don't know whether I talk about the same compost method that you addressed here, but since Alex Kruger, who really kicked my butt into action last year together with Fabian von Hase, suggested that I speak here, I gladly share my experiences. For me, always the first question is why composting? That forms the context and the source of inspiration for doing anything. Composting happens in the wild, and it's through holistic management mainly. I learned that it happens through the interaction of animals, large and small, insects and microorganisms. And how this can be enhanced, especially on rangelands and the extensive dry areas of Southern Africa. I learned from Alan Savory and all my wonderful holistic management colleagues and the scientists, especially Dr. Christine Jones and Dr. Elaine Ingham, Professor Walter Jene, Gabe Brown, Dr. Zach Bush, and all these people's wonderful network of practical science. So then if we want to create soil that has the same functionality and fertility as this wild soil, but without the range of animals and plants and the seemingly chaotic circumstances and time frame they do their thing in, we humans make compost. So thanks to some people, I started doing this on my own, in my own backyard, but then later on had a bigger playground, which I'm really grateful for. Ina Wiebke and the people of Farm Okokuna trusted me to implement beyond my own backyard. And Dr. Ivo Zimmermann, I want to recognize here because he provided many valuable links and critical links to my learning. I find it fascinating how compost is something real, tangible, and it is something symbolic, something art. I want to quote some things that really influenced me. If I want to bring about some change, I do something different, or I do it differently. If I want to bring about fundamental or big changes, I see things differently. I read this in the book of Gabe Brown, Dirt to Soil, which I highly recommend to everybody. I love the term quorum sensing that Christine Jones uses as a skill or as a process that microbes use in the soil and that plants use to collaborate with each other. And this sort of systemic collaboration is also represented in the work of Dr. Otto Schama, Presencing Institute of MIT, and the Ubuntu Lab Institute, led by Dr. Martin and Aggie Kalungu-Banda, who I highly respect for their work regarding this. And then came the big thing, COVID-19. Before that already, I was into microbes. And the act of making compost became my practical response and creative expression to governments and big business, avoiding to address climate change, the collapse of the capitalist economy, and declaring a virus the enemy, and removing humans from their connection and trust in the wonder of natural death and decay and transformative growth. This thing of looking at the dark spaces, I think, is critical today. Coming back to the real, the corporeal, embodied existence. So Namibia is a very dry country, as most of you know, and our capital, Windhoek, and other big towns nearly ran out of water 2 years ago. And our food security is extremely vulnerable because we import most of our things. We grow a lot of our things. It's increasing, very encouraging, but we still need to enhance that. So my approach is usually to practice first and then share my experience. And I started in my own backyard, wanting to grow only with the 15 cubic meters of rainwater that I can store through the winter. And the technology recommended by Fabian von Hase, a wonderful permaculture designer and facilitator, I built 2 wicking beds like you see here on the picture. It was a long journey to get them right, but now they are planted.
Wiebke?
Yes.
Sorry, could you share your screen?
Oh, am I not sharing my screen? I am sorry. Sorry, let me just go back to Zoom. I can't quite. Here we go, and then I go back to, sorry, I thought I had it shared. Can you see it now?
Not yet, but just.
Okay, let me go. This is interesting. We tested this, and I say share. I shared the wrong screen.
There we go. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your patience. So I built wicking beds. In the background, you see one of those water containers, you know, the 5,000 cubic meter tanks that collect rainwater. And I want to use only that to grow some vegetables. I want to experiment with that. And I calculated that I'd need around, or that I could possibly grow 4 square meters. So one of these beds here is 2 square meters of, or a little bit more actually, 2.5 square meters. And they need high carbon compost. So I haven't made compost in Windhoek before, except for very informally and just putting things into a bin that one can buy at hardware stores. So I started making compost, and it was these beautiful beds, and we covered them with natural materials. And later on I realized, oh, there's so much material. I can go into, you know, using recycled materials, and everything that holds a heap was used. And first I wanted to use only natural materials, and I was excited seeing these mushrooms growing under the palm leaves, palm fronds that I used to shade. I used mostly wood chips, which I obtained from the garden waste site of the Windhoek municipality. And then I read voraciously, and I learned that the better you aerate a compost, the better it will digest. And so I put in these pipes and pulled them out later on, and was helped by various young people, mostly young men. And it was interesting. They didn't last so long. I come back to the human factor in all of this a little bit later. Then I increased my aeration, drilling hundreds of holes into pipes, vertical and horizontal, And I decided I will make a bigger holding container. And you see this rectangular shape here, which I made from mesh weld and lined with cardboard. And then I realized that the proportions were too wide, it just bent outside. So there was a lot of learning from mistakes. And then Ivo Timmerman referred me to the work of Gary Gillespie. And Gary Gillespie, I want to give a big acknowledgement here. He's a wonderful promoter and answered emails in the middle of the night, just before or just after having a huge operation for lung cancer. And I mean, Gary has just been really amazing as a resource. Basically, what he came up with is a hot composting process that's sped up and can digest woody material within 6 months, 6 weeks if it's done, if the conditions are right. So I want to introduce you to the static pile inoculated compost extension. The extension actually stands for being extended into the human action. It's critical that we people do something, that we contribute to this whole process. So when I started working at Okukuna, we used this process and we adapted it so it would work for our situations here. As I said already, Australia and Namibia share the same very dry, arid conditions. We started in the middle of winter. It was an extremely cold, extremely dry winter. All the materials was very dry. So it was very important that we use this wet process of the spice. And it was conceived as an income generation for shack dwellers, not only for growing their own food, but also for selling the compost. And we had previously figured out a community production wouldn't work for the people. They wanted to work in individual or small team arrangements. And so, as I will explain later, that we chose a modular process that allowed some quantification and handling by a single person, mostly women. So what is the spice compost? It's an inoculated compost where microbes speed up the decomposition. I'm sure that there are hundreds of other possible methods that do a similar thing. It's initially aerobic, followed by a low oxygen stage. So initially high aerobic and then followed by low oxygen digestion. The woody plants or the plants to the manure carbon to nitrogen ratio is roughly 4:1. Oh, I had all sorts of challenges just figuring out, is this by volume, by weight, wet or dry? You just have to try it. We use buckets to measure. If it smells of ammonia, you know you have too much nitrogen in there, so reduce the manure or the green material. We use semi-purified water. One of the big reasons why we do it at Okukuna, because there we have access to semi-purified water. Windhoek is one of the few cities in the world that actually recycles its toilet water to drinking water. So we have a very sophisticated water treatment plant, and we get semi-purified water, but it contains chlorine. So we leave it standing in a tank with an open lid so that the chlorine can evaporate before we use it. And we also use some biochar and meaty scraps because they can add value to the nutrients, but it's not absolutely necessary. So it all starts with fermenting the inoculant. The basis of that is a lactic acid bacterium serum made with rice and milk, a la the Korean natural farming, or other people who are also doing similar things. One could, the very first ones I did with commercial EM because I didn't know yet how to do the lab. And then the special thing is that one basically immerses a tea bag full of green leafy stuff together with bone meal and seaweed meal, bran, and some salt and basalt dust if you have some, and then puts that into clean water and with a lab and samulasse. And that adds the phototrophic bacteria to the process, and it ferments for 5 days, being moved daily. And then one lifts out the tea bag, and the fluid is then diluted very weakly. It's about 1 cubic meter on 1 liter of inoculant needed for 1 cubic meter of compost. The other ingredients are prepared. The cattle manure, which we got from feedlot here close by, we sieved so that we had fairly fine material that made it easier because it was also dry. We made affordable sieves from pallet wood and welded mesh. It was a wonderful thing to see the power of the internet giving one such ideas. And we collected all sorts of carrying containers. The 20-liter paint buckets are the ideal ones. And then when you need to soak the rough parts of the manure, a plastic sheet in a kind of in a soaking pit is a good idea. So when it comes to layering the heaps, we recently did a workshop where we had 2 methods, a hand-packed shape, where you basically form a little ridge on the outside the whole time, and then you can come up with a very neat heap. You will see it later on in the presentation. But it takes longer, and this bucket, we called it ombale, this kind of basket structure is a winner. People love it because we were able to cut this welded mesh into neat, divided into very precise, we had no wastage there. We got big cardboard boxes from a recycling plant that is very close by, and layered our material in there. So we basically have 2.2 cubic meters of materials to start with. And here you see some pictures of it being filled. Initially, we used these pipes to provide some aeration hollows. Gary Gillespie said, "Oh, don't worry about that. It's really not necessary." So we later on, some people use it, some people don't. Secondly, you then remove the weld mesh and the cardboard box. I loved the neat layering that the woman had done here. Initially, we had a bit of grass, so here you see grass and not just wood chips. Here on the bottom, you see a one made with the wood chips and manure. And then the critical thing of the spice compost is this ditch at the top. So it's like a bread loaf with a ditch there, so that the plastic sheet can be wrapped around the heap, way down in the middle with some stones, so that the moisture that evaporates and then condenses against the plastic feeds back into the compost heap. Finally, the plastic sheeting is covered with cardboard box to help the plastic last longer and not deteriorate in the sun so easily. Here you see a graphic image of the spice compost structure. In Australia, they make windrows 50 meters long, and they build them with machines. They don't do this neat loaf making thing that we did by hand. Our compost heaps reached 70 degrees within a couple of days. Anyway, they should just be above 50 and stay there for about 2 weeks, and then move down to 50 to 40. And initially, that is a high, aerobic process, and later on the fungi take over. And you will see all sorts of organisms colonizing these compost heaps. It's a wonderful TV. This is us opening. Yes.
Sorry, I have to ask you to wrap it up. One more minute, please.
Oh la la. Okay. So this is the monitoring after 6 weeks. If it's not completely digested, we put it back with some more inoculant, for another 6 weeks, and if needed, another 6 weeks. Sometimes the ligneous woody material really needs that. We market the compost like this. This is one of our labels. And the modular production was really just to help people, individual business people, use this. And what helped me greatly was the holistic decision-making framework, making sure that it works for the environment, it works financially, and it's good for the relationships now and into the future, and that we address the root causes of problems and don't just address fix the symptoms. So I think I've finished. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Wiebke. That was a wonderful presentation. We're going to move on to our next speaker immediately, and we'll take questions a bit later. The next speaker coming up is Julian Rambert. After a few years of dabbling in the family business in contracting here in Mauritius, the Biobin appeared in his life. Since 2016, he's been actively working on the project, and it's been a full-time basis since 2017. There's lots of struggles breaking into the market segments, and they're now gaining momentum slowly but surely. Compost and returning carbon to the soil are Julian's passions and life combats. Please go ahead, Julian.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me on this discussion. I feel very honored, and I am happy to share knowledge that I have gathered. When the lady was speaking earlier, something went ding. I was once sitting with an inventor of a biobin who is Australian. He's got the Australians Award for Environmentalist of the Year, etc. And he was telling me, talking about microbes, how they had taken a microbe and put some dye on it and had followed it. And this microbe had traveled 3 kilometers to go and get phosphorus and then came back to the plant that needed the phosphorus. So bacteria is actually amazing. But let me get straight into the subject. Today, we're going to speak of aerated static pile. So basically, when you do compost, everybody knows that if you want to do hot compost, at one point or the other, you will have to turn it. It has to be turned because of oxygen, to put oxygen back in the system. Sorry, I'm just checking the time. I know we have exactly 12 minutes. And you have to put oxygen in the system, but that implies labor or machines or windrow turners, etc. So some very clever people sat down and they said, well, instead of turning the compost to put oxygen in it, why don't we push oxygen through it? All right, this is like a it's not a very big one. I would reckon that there's about, let's say, 6-7 cubes or maybe 10 cubes on each side. And as you can see, it's nothing very technologically advanced. This is how do you call this? A jumping castle pump and some PVC pipes. And the only other thing that is needed is a timer. All right. In general, you want to run it for about 20 seconds every 20 minutes. Although there's multiple applications. This could work, for example, at a municipal depot, all right, where there would be sections. All right. One motor is running six pipes. In general, they recommend that the pipes are not more than 20 meters long and about 6 meters high, because otherwise you stop losing air. But since we are more oriented towards community gardens, etc., check how cute is this little thing. As we saw earlier, things can be made out of pallet wood, out of many things. And let me just try sharing my screen. I've never done it before. I hope it's going to work. Give me a second, guys. Gallery. Can you see it, if I may ask?
Not yet.
Not yet. Sorry for that. Excuse me. Give me a second. I do apologize. And now?
What do you want us to see, Julian?
Yes.
There's
Do
a
you see
man
it now?
in the sea. I think it's you.
Now, do you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what it looks like before I go to build it. Obviously, this is obviously this is high class PVC. They recommend to use, it's called class 16 PVC. So it's 16 millimeter thick and it can take heat and pressure. All right. And then I will share something else with you. Sorry for that. I do apologize because they say the proof is in the pudding, right? Aye, 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 aye. So this is what it looks like when we put it on the floor. All right. So basically we take the pipes and we cover it with some woody material in order not for the food waste, etc., to be able to go and clog the pipes because there's holes in the pipes. All right. And one last picture, which will be the, excuse me for that, which will be the finished product. This is, by the way, at a major retailer's distribution center. All right. And yeah, here we go. And this is literally after, let's say, 4 weeks. All right. So what we do is that we pre-compost the waste inside the biobin, and then we move it to the aerated static piles. So the theory behind it, I said it was more clever people that invented it than me. And what they do is that they cover the pipes, first of all, with some woody material, and then they add some raw food. I am lucky enough to be able to put pre-composted food. But even if you had to put raw food, and the experiment that struck me the most, I think that's the right word, the experiment that struck me the most was one whereby they took 1.5 tons of dead tilapia, and they put the first layer of woody materials on the pipes, and then they put a layer of tilapia, layer of woody material, tilapia, etc. And then what they do is they cover the pile with wood chips, and it's also recommended, if possible, to put quite a lot of compost. They recommend 1 foot of compost, which is about 30 centimeters, but I think that's too much. And with my experience, with experience, I find that about 5 to 10 centimeters of sawdust or wood shavings is more than enough to contain all the smells, because as you will push air through the material, the sawdust, the carbonous material, will indeed absorb the smells, etc., etc. Right. As I was saying a bit earlier, I build these things from scratch. I have to build it from scratch because it's sold to customers or rented out to customers. But at the end of the day, where there's a will, there's a way. Like this could really be built with second-hand materials as well as this system with a second-hand, how do you say, with a second-hand castle, jumping castle pump or things like this. And basically, sorry, I don't have much to say because it's a very easy system. And as the lady who was speaking before me said, well, it's just a question of trying and getting it to work. But where I think it can adapt itself very well to urban gardens is that thanks to this system, smells are totally eliminated if there's the right amount of, if there is the right amount of carbonous material and the ratios are right. So to answer your question, ma'am, they say not to turn, they say that for the first 21 to 30 days when the pile is active, you don't need to turn it. And then they recommend 1 turn. You don't even have to put it on another air mat. You just have to leave it to mature for 3 or 4 weeks. And then it starts sitting as well. The only problems I have experienced with the system is that if your timer doesn't work, you might dry out your material. If there is too much air going through it, obviously it's going to dry the material as well. But otherwise, guys, if one can glue 2 pieces of PVC together, if one can put a plug in a socket on the wall, this is extremely easy to run. And it is very often in the industry, we hear that it costs a fortune to be able to do compost on a great scale. Well, I beg to differ. So a system like this, if you had to do it with the right, with all the right PVC, etc., you could do a system in KZN. We are processing. We are processing about 24 cubes at a time. All right, 24 cubes at a time with an investment of less than 35,000 rands. So I think the numbers speak for themselves. I know it's big numbers for community gardens, etc. But if it is scaled down, it costs virtually nothing, especially that I guess the people that are on this platform are people who are shakers and movers, for lack of a better word, and people who go and fetch things. So I repeat, it is extremely easy to run. And it's how can I say that? It's extremely easy to run, and with a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of common sense, one can do a lot. I don't know if the question about the flies was directed to me. What I have found is that as soon as there's flies, you add a little bit of sawdust on top, and as the air goes through the carbonous material, it's called a biofilter actually. As the air will go through the carbonous material does absorb the smells. And also, as the lady before me said, if you do get an ammonia smell, it means that the nitrogen is not getting enough carbon, and then the reaction of this is that you have ammonia gases being released. And ladies and gents, I don't have much more to say because it's a very easy. The maximum height of a heaps is about 6 meters. Yes, 6 meters, and the length about 70 feet long. So that would be about 22 meters. Indeed. Yeah. And if anybody needs more information, I'm going to put my email address in the chat section. And please, by all means, ask me questions. It's really easy, as I said. And for the scale of what can be produced, the cost of putting it up is not very big. As I said, they process about 24 to 25 cubes on one system that costs less than 40,000 rands, brand new, and it keeps turning and it keeps turning. So there is opportunities to resell the compost. There's a lot of opportunities to redistribute the compost. And as I said in the beginning, where there is a will, there is a way, and we are all people who have decided to make a change. We are making a change just by the mere fact that we are standing here. We are changing the world, basically. Yes, I did say 6 meters high. Yes, on effect. All right, guys, thank you very much. And I'm here for any question, and I'll put my phone number down as well.
Thank you very much, Julian.
Pleasure.
It's great to see the scale at which this can go and the investment. We're going to move on to our first respondent. Our first respondent coming up is Carlson De Cruz, who's one of the volunteers of the Scarborough Environmental Group and passionate about empowering communities and raising the awareness of the deep connection between us and our surrounding environment. Please go ahead, Kelson.
Well, firstly, thanks Eric and Marcella and the whole team to put this week together. Like Vika say, always start with compost, and that connection with the microbes. It's vital for, I guess, for humankind, So yeah, it's been quite overwhelming to learn, from Monday and today what's going on out there. So I'd like to start first with my question to Julian, and then if I have some time, just give a little background what's going on in Scarborough. I know, Julian, that you thanks so much what what you're saying regarding the small scale. That's what we need. We all like you say, we're always scratching for a little bit of money. So it's all about to use what we have available in the environment. But I know your company Biobin is doing quite a big systems. I think like a metal container, different size, and I think with those units could be a game changer for all communities and cities in South Africa. And are you in touch with the municipalities? I know there's a new laws coming to Cape Town now that very soon we'll not be able to, thank God, not throw our organic waste anymore. We're going to have to be all compost. Are you in touch with the cities around the country to change this this environment? And I mean, that's one question. And another one is, did you looking into retrofit that system that is quite amazing, because it looks like makes a lot of sense to use for biogas, use the methane for cooking. I mean, it just looks like one goes with the other. If you create a lot of gas out of that system, could it be used for cooking? And one third question is regarding the cost to maintain a unit like that. I mean, I think you've got a 2 square meter unit or the smallest unit. What's the cost of that, like a monthly cost to, I know there's a filter involved, a replacing filter, or and also electricity. I'm assuming that's run by electricity. And yeah, if you can give a little background on that, we really appreciate. Yeah, those are my questions to Julian. And then, yeah, just a quick little background, if I have the time, Erica, just what's going on here in Scarborough. Yeah, we're a small little village down south and close to the South Peninsula, close to the national park here. And it's about 500 residents. And yeah, it's been like a challenge. And they say when humans get pushed to a corner, with the waste, the new policies that's coming along, I mean, maybe one day we're gonna have the day zero for waste, so the community decide to do something about, and we start to collect on compost, and we create a little area here we call the Biodynamic Center, where that compost gets processed. And so we have a very simple system called the bucket system. So people drop off the full buckets of kitchen waste, and we're not very fast. We take anything, we try to keep very simple for the residents. And then they take home an empty bucket. So that's one way we do it. And we also empowering a young man called Bob. So he started his own little, you see the opportunity that some people don't want to drive to the bio center, or, so he starts his own little venture. So he's go into people's home and collect, drop off the empty bucket and collect the full one. So he make a little extra money per month. So it's going, yeah, he's flying, it's going very well. And I can see that that's the new way, there's no more throwing kitchen waste, compost, or I cannot even believe that we're throwing that away. It's insanity. But anyway, so it's,
thanks, Kelson.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to cut you here
cool.
so that the speakers can respond to your questions.
Thank you very much, guys. Cheers.
Julian, would you like to respond first?
Yes, please. Kelson, thank you very much for your questions. Government, Baba. So they all know about us. We've quoted, we've helped, but it goes through a lot of different processes. However, this week we received a call from your West Coast, from Langebaan, and from Saldanha Bay, and the landfill there is refusing already to take any food that has more than 40%, anything that has more than 40% content, moisture content. So these rules are starting to be applied, and now people are starting to act. I must be honest. And government, let us say things as they are, whereby in other countries it is an honor to be seen with a government. Well, let's say things as they are in Africa and in Mauritius and all these countries, it becomes a liability to be seen with a government because people start thinking things. I'm not bad-mouthing, but it's the truth. Question number 2, sir, when it comes to gas, we do not produce methane. Methane is produced in an anaerobic process, whereas our system is fully aerobic because we pump oxygen through the system. So the only gases that do come out is CO2 and some water moisture. And your third question, the price of a biobin itself, well, for the 2.5 cubic bin, we start at 8,500 rand a month, and for our 12 cubic meter bin, we are at 17 or 18,000 rands a month. But this is a fully serviced option. We do the maintenance, we bring the carbon, we give you reports. If you want us to weigh the weight, we weigh the weight, and that's about it. Yes. And the reason why we don't sell the biobin, or we don't sell it outright, and we keep a maintenance contract, is that our reputation is at stake. Imagine we sell you, or we would sell anybody a biobin, and then somebody else works there, it's not well operated, and they're like, hey, it doesn't work that thing. So we have to look after our reputation. I hope I have answered your question, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Wiebke, you had a question to answer too.
Yeah, I posted my responses to the questions there, but since the respondents didn't ask me anything directly, I would like to just comment on two things: this whole issue of governance, which is also a challenge for us. I think ecological literacy must be added to our basic school curriculum, and I think what route we have taken in the community-based rangeland and livestock management and setting up a rangeland management policy and strategy. Namibia is the only country in Africa that actually has that. We went the route of just explaining principles of how nature functions. So we basically catch up with adults on ecological literacy on a farmer level and a decision maker level, whether that's corporates or whether that's government. It's going very slow, but I think it's a very rewarding exercise, because when people start to see this and it's hands-on, and you have 3D demonstrations of physics basically and biochemistry, people love that. So it's a long way to go, but it's the only way.
Thank you.
Then another thing about the methane, we don't have, the gas. That's a very strong process. Point of spice is that it, because of its covers with plastic, that is fed back into the heap, and it therefore has a higher carbon count, basically.
Thank you, Wiebke. That's very, very interesting. We're going to move on to our second respondent now, Dr. Ebrahiema, who's currently a researcher at Stellenbosch University, in the Department of Horticulture, and a co-founder of AquaOrganix. He specialized in post-harvest quality management of fresh fruit and vegetables, and graduated with a degree in BSc Life Science, BSc Microbiology, Masters in Agriculture, and PhD in Food Science. His hobbies and interests include hydroponics, aquaponics, and sustainable forms of urban agriculture. Please go ahead, Dr. Ebrahiema.
Thank you, Ada, for the introduction, and thank you, Wiebke and Julien, for the presentations. I got several questions written down. Julien, you mentioned that the material dries quite quickly using the system. Do your composting pile need to be more wet than the conventional composting? And also, is there a sufficient breaking down of the material, all right, before the composting pile dries up?
Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you very much for your question. When I said it dries quite quickly, sorry if I didn't communicate properly, it will all depend on how you play with a timer. So I put it on 20 seconds every 20 minutes. But for example, if someone had to run it for 3 minutes every 10 minutes, you would run a risk of drying out. Also, there's a test. They say that the bacteria and the carbon works the best at 60% humidity. And instead of using a probe, you can also just grab it. They call it the sponge test, and you press it, and you just want 1 or 2 drops coming out. And then you ask me, is that all right? Is that a good answer? And what we do as well is we cover it with tarpaulin to keep the steam inside as well, just as the spice method. And then when you said sufficiently breaks down, I didn't get your question, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to know, compared to the normal conventional composting, right? Do the material break down in a sufficient manner because of the dry material?
Not really, sir. Not really. That's why we need to keep it. We need to keep it at 60%, just moist enough. The only risk is if the fan runs too long, it's going to dry out the material. But the material does break down much faster than it would normally. Yes. Yes. And if you don't mind, Doctor, if you can give me your email address, I'll send you a lot of pictures.
I wanted to know how long does this method take compared to the conventional composting?
Hello. If I told you I knew perfectly about conventional composting, I would be lying. But this system, if you take raw food, as we stand here, as we do it, the biobins are filled over about a month. All right. This has had the time to pre-compost. We put it on the air mat. We leave it 2-3 weeks. We move it to its maturation pile where we don't aerate it anymore. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, when the temperature drops again, we can use the compost. All right. But the time frames from raw food to the first turn or to the first move is between 21 to 30 days. 21 to 30 days, you turn it again, you let it sit for 3 weeks, it's ready. Because you have injected so much oxygen that the bacteria have really worked. And also with this method, in, I would say, 48 hours, not even 48 hours, we also reach 70 degrees Celsius, whereby all the pathogens are killed, all pathogens are killed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you. Wiebke, I have several questions for you as well. You mentioned that the carbon to nitrogen ratio, is it the same as the thermophilic or conventional composting? This question is for Wiebke. Thank you, Julian.
I didn't make any scientific experiments in comparison, so I can't really, but I believe it's very similar.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Also, you mentioned your temperatures reached 70 degrees Celsius. That's normally when thermophilic bacteria starts thriving. Right, so it's quite interesting because at that temperature, it should kill most human and plant pathogens.
Yes, and that's essential for us because we sell it.
So considering that the aeration affects the temperature of the composting pile, all right? Would the temperature be similar to that of normal composting, or is it much higher? You wouldn't actually.
Again, I can't really compare because I've never used a compost probe before, you know. So I didn't actually do a full comparison.
Okay,
it's just that, yeah.
I have another question. How does this method work for animal byproducts, like you mentioned, your cattle manure? How well does it work?
Extremely well, and I mean the decomposition goes so much better if you add any meaty product in there. I mean, we have currently a total mice plague in our informal settlements. So we started catching mice and putting them in the compost heaps. People, you know, their fish heads and their feathers from a chicken and anything is just chucked in there. We even made an example. One of our ladies is extremely curious. I had collected my own urine, and I wanted to see whether this would work with human urine because Alex Kruger is very passionate about urine. And yes, we produced some excellent compost, dark brown, black compost, digestion equally fast to the manure. So it's, you know, there's really such a wide sourcing of materials that if we are clever, we can use it.
Thank you. I got just one last question. What are some of the challenges or limitations that you or Julien have found using this method?
Yeah, the challenges for us is the transport of the materials. The municipality wasn't very collaborative in transporting the chips to the site where we had the semi-purified water. We couldn't get the it looks very unlikely, I haven't tried it, to get the semi-purified water to the garden waste sites. So just getting the resources all together, that is a bit of a challenge. And our whole apartheid design of cities is making this quite a challenge.
Thank you, Wiebke. That's a very good. We have a similar challenge in Cape Town. Dr. Ebrahiema, are you finished with your questions and you
Yes,
satisfied with your answers?
Thank you so much. Yes.
Okay. Kelson, are you satisfied with your answers, or you have one more question?
Yeah, no, that's. I just have one quick one. I mean, 70 degrees. I mean, that's massive, and the opportunity to maybe. Did you guys ever try to run some pipes under that compost heap and get some hot water? That's yeah.
That's a good idea.
Can I quickly respond to that? I experienced that in Zimbabwe when we had a campsite and they used elephant dung and then had pipes for our showers. No, unfortunately, again, because we produce at a site where people don't live, in between the shacks, high density shacks, there's often just a half a meter, and we can't make compost near the shacks. So, where you would need the hot water. But the small application, the principle we explained to people, we said, look, a 20-liter drum and a small composting setup with some grid around it, So we are very curious to see what people will come up with.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelson, and thank you, Dr. Ebrahiema. Julien, you have one answer?
Not really one answer, just a comment about urine. There is a French gentleman who is passionate about the soils, etc. His name is Pierre Rabhi, and he always hammers how the fastest and easiest way to put back life in your soil, whether it be at home or in your fields, etc., is human urine. And we're never gonna run out of urine, so it might be a good idea to start scattering some in the ground.
Thank you, Julien.
Well, can I just say a word of warning about that? We recommend that people, are selective about whose urine to use, depending on the medication they take and depending on the hormones they take. So we recommend the kids are the first choice and let them pee into the night bucket anyway. And then also it can become too much, so diluting it is important. And but again, also the inoculant deals with the salts that can lead to salination.
Thank you, Wiebke. Margie, you've asked a lot of questions and there's been quite a few of your questions answered. I just want to check whether you have any further questions that haven't been answered at this stage. Margie, are you there?
Yeah, I think I'm fine. I'll follow up with Wiebke via email because I'm really on a very similar learning path. So thank you for a great presentation.
Okay, thank you very, very much. Thank you to the speakers and for the respondents. There is one last person, Alina. You wanted to make a comment?
Yes, hello, hi. Yeah, thank you so much. And first of all, thank you to all of you. I'm coming from a very different industry. I'm like from Germany and I'm like in HR, so I have nothing to do with compost at all, but I have like really like a sincere interest in Pachamama and Mother Earth and like all what we can do. And I just like wanted to say thank you. All what's been coming up in this meeting is like it's not only giving hope, but actually really trust that like there is a way to change. And what I wanted to just share, like yesterday I was also on a Zoom call for social entrepreneurship in Germany, where like specific companies got voted as like startups in this field. 30% social entrepreneurship. So I think it's also kind of like composting goes in that direction. 30% is not a lot, but also like in Europe, there's like, I mean, you all know it, there's like a huge emphasis of 30% is not enough, but we are all learning, and this, like it's also there. But what I found really interesting there is like also even in Europe, the notion or the trend is government. We can't rely on government. We can't rely on politics. Small companies, small scale companies, that's the way to go. And they are going to change, and politics and government are going to follow. And of course, we have to train them and educate them. And this is like really important. But like, I also really love this comment from one of the speakers today of hands-on training, and really like showing like with cases, real cases of this is how things are going to go. So I just like wanted to say it's not only in Africa and South Africa, Germany, Europe, we're all facing it. So I just wanted to say thank you for spreading hope and trust and ways forward.
Thank you very much, Julien, for those reflections. I wanted to check, Jill, thank you very much for hosting the Zoom. Was there any other questions that I missed?
No, I think, hello everyone. I've been copying all the questions and I think you have covered them all. I've got my own question actually, if I may, just from following what's been said by Wiebke and Julien. I mean, could one then say perhaps that one doesn't need to turn or aerate a pile if one adds these lactobacillus microbes? Is that kind of, you know, if you're not going to turn it or aerate it, is that the other option then, is to add this inoculant that then somehow sort of replaces that function? Not that they are actually then bringing oxygen in, but that the pile doesn't need as much aeration if you add this inoculant. Sorry, I suppose the question is more for Wiebke actually, because it's her process.
Okay, thanks, Jill. I think it's not only the inoculant, it's also the covering with a plastic. So to make sure that it doesn't dry out, you know, on the outside and remains wet on the inside. It will in any case dry out on the outside. Well, the moisture will distribute this not quite evenly throughout the whole heap. But I think the cover is as important as the inoculant. And many conventional compost processes, I believe, at least I've read, are using inoculants. I think, so that is maybe not so new. The speed of digestion, how long it takes, whether it just takes 6 weeks or 12 weeks, really depends also on the material that you use to start with. If it's food waste, it will be finished probably after 4 or 5 weeks. So garden waste with lots of woody material will take longer. And you're right, it doesn't require turning, at least for 6 weeks. And then you check, because then the whole maturation of all the various microbes going through these different phases of aerobic and low oxygen, and the pH changes from, you know, acid to more 7. Then you turn it again and wet it again. That's the important thing, while we then turn it and start the process over if need be.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer.
Thank you, Wiebke. Is there anybody else that has any questions at this stage? I don't see any hands or any other questions in the chat, and our hour is up. So at this stage, I'd just like to say thank you very much to the speakers, Wiebke and Julien, and for your insights and your time that you have spent with us today. Thank you very much. And Dr. Ebrahiema and Kelson, thank you very much for your questions and your respondents, and also your time today. And for everybody else that joined us today, thank you very much for your time. I hope it was insightful, and please remember that tomorrow, 10 a.m., there is a composting best practices workshop, and tomorrow evening, actually a physical workshop at Arendse farm in Cape Town. So with all that said, thank you very much, everybody. Please put your videos on and unmute yourselves and say goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Erica. Fantastic.
Thanks,
See you
Erica.
Tomorrow.
It
Thank
was
you.
a privilege,
Bye.
and I look
But-
forward to seeing you more often. Bye.
And
Bye.
Erica, you sure it was Orasa or was it Orania? Orania, not everybody can go there.
Orasa is presenting tomorrow, and Orania is in the afternoon.
Will you send out the links to those presentations?
Yes, everybody that registered gave an email, and you'll be getting an email after this with links to the recording and the presentation.
Great.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to us. All the
Thank
best.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Cheers, guys.
you. Bye.
Thank you.